Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you as always for tuning back in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand reader, and today folks we are looking at another card combination exercise. So this pair came as a request from Eileen. Thank you Eileen for requesting it. I do think it is worth looking into a pair like this one because it does come across as a little bit tricky. The moon is generally associated with lovely things in Lenormand. It is not like the tarot moon. The Lenormand moon is a gentle card of appreciation, honors, and recognition. It is also a feminine card that has a sense of attraction. And so in love relationships, it can suggest chemistry and some kind of wonderful energy that is unfolding between two people. And it is also associated with offers. So as it stands, the moon is generally really positive and gentle and kind in Lenormand. The snake, on the other hand, is definitely one of the trickiest Lenormand cards. It is often associated with envy, jealousy. It is clearly someone who is not well-intentioned. In love relationships, it can suggest a third party. It can represent outright cheating and dishonesty. And it is also someone who could be passive aggressive, someone who is calm and generally really goal-oriented, often materialistic, self-interested, but it can also represent someone who is rather clever. So the snake is generally negative and it tends to be toxic and poisonous in these ways. But there are times when the snake can be positive. So for example, in my personal dictionary, I like to see the snake with the fish because then it tells me that someone has really good business acumen, is really good with money and finances, and is also clear about their goals, which often comes as an advantage. So these two cards together can be tricky. It is not obviously clear what these two cards can mean together. So in a way, it's up to you, but it also makes sense to use the individual cards to think about how they work together. So the moon and snake, personally, I feel can represent the idea of going about one's goals in a calm way. The snake and moon are both calm and peaceful cards. So there is a clear sense of slowness and also I would say the idea of being calculated. So not reactive, but really calm and calculated. The moon and snake can also represent challenges in the sense that there is a very tricky situation that we need to handle very carefully and peacefully. And in love relationships, it can represent the idea of something going on behind the scenes. Maybe there is a third party. There could be someone who has our partner in focus. So the snake would really alert us to something going on. So we need to be really careful and really alert. But the moon and the snake actually both advise us to be calm about this and to be peaceful. So no being reactive, no being aggressive, just really being observant, alert, calm, and calculated. Now, I can take this pair to operate a little bit like the fox and moon. The fox and moon can suggest turning down an offer. And I get this indication from Titania's dictionary of combinations. And so I feel that the fox and snake can also suggest something similar. The idea that we need to be really careful about an offer and possibly walk away from it. It can also suggest that we negotiate the terms. So really being roundabout in our ways, charming the birds off the trees, and being really focused on our goals and negotiating our advantage. This can therefore be similar to the flowers and snake. The flowers and snake can go both ways. It can be about being, sort of nice, charming the birds off the trees, but it can also be outright false flattery. And I think something similar can come through the moon and snake, where someone is just being fake about their kind intentions, which would be represented by the moon. The snake would tell us that they're being fake, that they're being false to our face. So anyway, we look at these cards, and in any context, the snake definitely alerts us to something going on, something that is not right, and also both cards advise us to be calm, centered, calculated, and the exact opposite of being reactive. So let's go ahead and draw some triplets with this rather tricky combination and see what are the different combinations that we can get, different meanings of the cards. Oh, the cross. So this would be challenging, I would say. The cross tends to be challenging. It's associated with the idea of burdens, bearing one's cross. But it can also be associated with spirituality and the idea of things being destined, things that are meant to be. But with the snake, especially next to each other here, the snake and cross certainly suggests some kind of challenge. Now, it's not a challenge like the whip or the mouse or the scythe or the clouds. They're inner cards. They seem to be psychological, something going on inside. Has to do with feelings, probably suggested by the moon. The idea of being observant and, the cross being one of destiny and deeper lessons. So when I look at these three cards together, I suggest that they can point to the idea of having to bide one's time, and also having to make some difficult choices, sacrifices. But the thing about the snake in the middle is that we need to weigh this out, and we need to weigh it out calmly in a calculated way. At the same time, the snake can ask us to focus on our self-interest, which means with the cross that some things will need to fall through. It's a bit like putting ourselves first and having to deal with the consequences of that. But I have to say that the cross doesn't make this easy, and it probably suggests that this is going against our will. The idea of the cross is that it burdens us with the idea of having to deal with the situation. But the snake and cross, I have to say, can also suggest that someone has the upper hand over us. It's possible. The cross is burdensome in this sense, but the snake tells us to play it in a smart way, to let them have their way. That would be the smart thing to do. And also with the moon, to more or less pretend that things are okay. But the cross clearly tells us that there isn't much we can do about this right now. So a challenging situation that we sort of have to swallow. You know what I mean? We have to deal with it. We can't do anything about it, except be smart and just make it seem like everything is okay. Now, suppose we have the cross in the center here. Does it change things? I don't really think it changed things. The moon and cross can suggest an important offer, but also the need to make choices here. It's possible with the snake on the right-hand side that we have to walk away from an offer or from a proposal. It's a tough choice, and it might not be easy to make, and probably one is going to fall through in favor of the other. So that's how I would read the snake on the other side of the cross. Suppose we had the moon in the middle here. Again, I feel that not much changes. The idea of having to walk away from something or turn away from it is emphasized when the snake is on the right-hand side. And the cross and moon can suggest an offer with a strong sense of purpose to it. But because of the snake, again, I feel that it's a tough choice, and we need to probably sacrifice one for the other. Let me know if you have other suggestions about these cards. They're really not straightforward. They can be pretty tricky. Now, suppose we put the cards in this way. I think it's similar to what we read earlier. The snake would then suggest having to move forward with caution. And also, it's possible that things can be positively resolved because the moon is on the right-hand side. So if we were to read the cards as unfolding from left to right, it's possible that through the snake and cross, we have to go through a phase of trials and tests, but then the moon sees us through. Certainly with the moon in this position and with the cross in the middle, we should hope that we can do well at least. You know, the idea of having a positive attitude is highlighted through the moon on the right, I feel. But the snake and cross, I think, really brings out this idea of being tested and having to, prove ourselves in some way. But again, the moon advises this idea of being gentle and kind. So the cross is pretty tricky here. It brings a sense of burden. Let's try another triplet. So just drawing the cards at random. The man. Okay, so with person cards, I would say this is definitely someone whom we need to be careful with. So anytime we have the snake and a person card, the snake and woman, the snake and man, the snake and dog, as the dog represents a friend, we should be careful of false flattery, false intentions. And the snake can also advise us to not share everything with this person. So really being discreet, not necessarily trusting them with everything. Just keeping the thoughts to ourselves is really indicated through the snake and the cards. Now, the moon next to the man can suggest that he is a kind person. I feel that it would be best when the moon is on the other side, on the right-hand side, and the snake is earlier in the line. That way, it's possible that initially we have doubts about this person, or initially we're being careful about this person, but that things can sort of work out, and it turns out that this person is nice and gentle, and probably someone we can get along with. Still, I don't think this is a relationship to dive right into. I mean, the snake is really, really tricky when it comes to relationship. It is one of the most challenging cards when it comes to relationships, in the sense that it points to someone who is selfish, self-interested, really false, and just outright self-interested. So they're not interested in us, they're interested in themselves, and it's about them getting their way. I feel the snake overpowers the moon. I'm just saying that it can be a possibility, probably depending on context and other factors that influence the readings, where the moon can be a positive card here. And I think that anywhere the man is in this triplet, I think it's pretty much the same. I don't see the cards changing because of his position in the reading. I really feel that it turns out to be the same. So that's for a person card, and these ideas would apply to any person card. Let's go for a third triplet. The Coffin. Wow. So I think this clearly represents an ending and the need to move away from the situation. So I think this is a disappointment. The moon softens the snake, but the moon next to the coffin I often take to mean the end of a cycle. And that's because of the moon phases, the waxing and waning moon. And with the coffin on the right-hand side, I really feel that it is time to let this go. Because of the snake and the challenges that the snake brings, I feel that it's probably a situation that is more or less hopeless, in the sense that it can't be saved. And the snake also suggests to walk away from this in a kind and gentle way. There's no need to make a fuss about it. Just let it fall off. The snake and coffin, the idea of an ending with a snake, can suggest shedding old skin. I feel this can come through with the snake and coffin. And in this sense, this can be something of a spiritual transformation. With the moon, this can be about intuition and feelings and, things that are happening inside. The more psychic side of life can come through here. And so the triplet would then suggest the idea of letting go in a deeper spiritual sense. Possibly forgiveness, depending on the situation of the client. I like to see the flowers for forgiveness. The child as well works well. The idea of renewal and innocence come through here. But through these cards, I really feel that there's a clear ending happening. We need to let it go. We should not cling. We should just allow for this transformation to happen and to release ourselves from negativity, from expectations. I think that the cards are pretty much the same, meaning regardless of their order, we still have the end of a phase here and the snake moves on. Even if the coffin were not in the middle here, it is definitely the idea of letting go and moving on and allowing things to come to a close. Same thing with this order. I'm not seeing that the order matters with the coffin. I think the coffin and snake are the two cards that I think carry the most meaning in this triplet. The moon sort of just creates an energy of a softer energy in here and possibly brings this spiritual element. But the snake and coffin in any order of this triplet, I feel really comes through strongly with the idea of ending and letting go. A pretty clear triplet as far as I'm concerned. Let's move on to more triplets. The letter. I think that's pretty clear. The news or the information that comes through the letter is tricky. We need to be really careful of what we're reading. In fact, I really feel that with a card like the snake, whether it's the letter or the book or other cards that suggest there is a message, like the rider, definitely we need to be careful of the message here because it's either false or that there are hidden elements to it. There can be a trap. It can be misleading. Any of these are very likely when we have the snake and the letter. And the moon here doesn't make a difference except insofar as it characterizes the letter and also advises us on how to handle this situation. So the moon and letter can represent an offer. But with the snake, be careful. We have to look at this in detail and possibly walk away from it, especially if we have the snake on the other side of the letter at the end of the line on the right. I feel that it's important to walk away from this, or at least consider it, possibly negotiate it. Another way to read these cards when we have a card of news or knowledge or information or message with something like the snake is that we need to keep it to ourselves. In other words, this can be a secret. The snake is a card of silence. It advises us to keep quiet. And that is very clear with something like the letter. And it would be the same with the bird, although with the bird, the order will matter because the bird is vocal in contrast with the snake, which is silent. But when we have the letter and the snake, I really feel that these cards are telling us to be quiet about this news. It's possible that we have access to some private information that is not yet announced. So with this, it is very clear that the advice is to keep it to ourselves. The order of starting with the letter and ending with the moon with the snake in the middle, I don't feel makes much of a difference. I think it's possible that the moon on the right can sort of advantage us. Maybe it does as well in the middle here. But again, I think the main essence is either the idea of silence or the idea of being careful about what this information is. Do not take it at face value. There are hidden elements to it. Very interesting triplet, and I think a pretty clear one. The meaning isn't too mysterious. Okay, so we read the man. The same thing will happen as we read with the man, because the woman and man are both completely neutral cards. I've talked about this in the significator video. They just represent people and they take their characteristics entirely from nearby cards. So I'm going to put this aside and you can go back to the section with the man because it is exactly the same thing except it would represent a woman. And again, I've also talked about the gender thing between the man and woman in the significator video. So let's try another card. Okay, the dog, same thing. Like I said, with the man and woman, they represent people, and so can the dog. So with the dog, the idea of a friend, this is what you would call frenemies. I've seen this word before, the idea of a snake and a dog is someone who is really not our friend. They're really someone who is working against us. I think the same thing would happen between the dog and fox, but I really feel that the snake, there is something a bit more toxic about the snake. It's a bit sharper, it's a more mean card. But the idea of someone who is self-interested and possibly a frenemy is very clearly represented. So same thing as with the woman and man. Let's try yet another one. Okay, now that is an interesting turn of energies for the cards. The clover can really help overturn the snake. In this sense, the snake can maintain its challenging aspects, but the thing about the clover is that we are able to overcome it. The clover is one of the most positive cards of the deck. It has to do with luck, and it also has to do with the idea of overturning challenges. So if we saw the clover and mouse, for example, it would tell us that we're able to overcome the losses and possibly even recover them. When we see the clover and the whip, it helps minimize the challenges of the whip. So with the snake and clover, what can happen here is two possibilities. There is the idea that we need to be snake-like. So the characteristics of the snake are needed, and the clover encourages us to, focus on our interest, to maybe white lie a little bit, not tell the whole story, keep some things to ourselves. The clover really advantages the snake towards our goals. And another way we can read the clover with something like the snake is that we're able to overcome the toxicity and challenges brought by the snake. So this is different from assuming the characters of the snake. This is being able to overcome someone or a situation that has the challenges of the snake. And certainly when we have the moon closer to the clover, there is the positive aspect of the moon that is brought out more strongly with the clover on this side. And with the snake, again, there is that sense of calm that we talked about a few times. In this triplet, I feel that here we're able to successfully negotiate an offer. It's also possible that people envy us because the moon is about recognition and appreciation. It's in the middle of the triplet, and the clover is one of the brightest cards. So this idea of doing well, of being successful, and of shining through can very much come through this pair here. But with the snake, there is this idea of envy. So it's very probable that in this triplet, people envy us for our good, for our success, the fact that we're recognized. But I would also say that the advice of the cards is not to be a show-off. So that's where you don't want to fan the flames of envy. The idea of the gentle moon here in the middle would be to tone it down a little bit because there are envious people around us. And to also be grateful for our good, So I feel that gratitude brings a certain degree of humility, if you sort of see what I mean. And so I feel this can come through here, the idea of just being appreciative for what we have and not, showing off to others, and feeling like we're superior to them. It's really about being appreciative of our good and appreciating that others might envy us for our good. So I feel that this kind of wisdom can come through these cards. Now, I think we looked at this structure, and if we had the snake at the end, I feel it's sort of a similar thing here. The clover is in the middle, so it does help bring out this sense of luck. So the clover really helps overturn the negativity of the snake. It helps us assume the clever characteristics of the snake, and it also helps us overcome the challenges that can come through with the snake. So a very nice card to see in this context. Let's do maybe one or two more triplets before we close the exercise. Ooh, the mouse. So the mouse is another one of those challenging cards. It is not extremely challenging like the whip, but it is still a bit annoying. And certainly if we leave the mouse unchecked, the losses can amount to a big deal. So when the mouse shows up, it's really important to nip something in the bud, nip the issues in the bud so that they don't grow out of control. Now with the snake and mouse, we are definitely looking at someone who is toxic. I would say someone who's a liar outright. There is trust issues definitely are at play. The moon sort of softens this, but we have 2 negative cards against 1 positive card in triplet. And certainly with the snake in the middle and the mouse on the right, I feel that this is a situation that is probably cannot be helped in the sense that this person or the situation is not going to be resolved. This is a toxic situation. We should not be mixing with it. With the moon, I would say walk away gently. No need to make a big fuss out of it, but really this is not, this is not promising in any way. If we had the moon in the middle, I sort of see the gentle aspects of the moon coming through, but I still don't think that the situation can be helped or overturned. It's not like the Clover at all. The mouse adds to the negativity of the snake, because with the Clover, we have 2 positive cards. With the mouse, we have 2 challenging cards. So there is that balance that comes through, right? Where we have more negative cards than positive cards, and the moon is soft. It's not like the sun, that is so bright that it overcomes everything. So definitely a situation that we need to handle carefully, but also that we need to move away from. This idea of waning and, this something getting smaller, losing it, I think can come through the moon and mouse, and certainly with the snake and mouse in any order, the losses are clear. This can be someone who, who is maybe offensive or says something mean, hurtful, something like that. But I think the idea with the moon is not to respond in kind. So the moon is the opposite of anything that would be confrontational. I really feel that with the energy of these cards, whatever the challenge, whatever the third card, the moon and snake clearly advises against being confrontational or aggressive, at least not too confrontational and aggressive. The idea is to be calm and calculated and to move away from what is clearly, especially with something like the mouse, a toxic situation. Let's do one more triplet before we close. Oh, the sun. How interesting. Now, the sun and moon can represent love, because the sun and moon are the archetypal feminine and masculine. So of course, like you've heard me say in the significator video, it depends on the relationship, but it is the archetypal symbology of a relationship, through the feminine and masculine. So these 2 cards would be great for a relationship, except we have the snake in here. Now, the sun can overcome the snake in a bit like the sense like what we saw with the Clover. Similar things can happen here. But when we have the sun and moon, because of their relationship interpretation, it's possible that the sun is not the sun and the moon is not the moon. Instead, it represents people in the relationship. The snake here can sort of offset the relationship. So what I'm saying is that you basically can think of the cards a little bit as like this. If you didn't have the symbology of the sun and moon and you just had neutral people, the snake here clearly suggests that there could be an issue in the relationship. So it can be a third-party relationship, like someone cheating. That is possible. But I have to say that the snake is strong sexually. So it is possible that there is a sexual attraction here. I would want more cards and more context for something like this, because in such an interpretation, the snake can go both ways and it's not really clear. So back to the sun and moon. They have positive energies And it's possible that the snake can bring up this idea of attraction. It's possible. If the snake is in the middle, I feel it can compromise things a little bit. But if we have the sun in the middle, then it can suggest that we go about the relationship calmly, carefully, and it's possible that things move forward positively. Same thing with the moon and sun in the middle. So this is a bit tricky. I would want a bit more context for these cards. They can be interesting. Chemistry and attraction and that strong sensuality, sexuality can come through the cards, but the snake can remain toxic. And so I think possibly the order of the cards matter. If we had something like this, it's possible that we need to maybe move away from it. I don't think it's as decisive, just because the sun and moon are very powerful in their archetypal energies and also in their positivity, especially the sun. But it can mean the idea of something like playing hard to get, of being careful moving forward or not being in a hurry to make things happen in the relationship. Now, if it's not about relationship, because these two cards don't have to represent a relationship, I think that good things can come through. I think we get the benefit, we get the honor, the appreciation, the success. These come through these two powerfully positive cards, especially the sun. But the snake in this sense is again the idea of being toned down about it, a bit like what we saw with the clover. The idea of not being too showy, keeping our success to ourselves, being humble and grateful. All of these can come through these cards. So these are my thoughts for the snake and moon. Thanks again, Eileen, for making the suggestion. It is quite an interesting pair. Let me know how you like my take on these interpretations, folks. I'm really looking forward to your comments below. And until we meet again, thank you so much for watching and take very good care of yourself.